Hi kids, it's your Uncle Jim here. Your grandmother told me you guys are thinking of starting a cupcake and cookie company. Well, I think that's a great idea. I think you'll learn a lot doing that. And I wondered, how could I help in this venture in some way? And then I realized that I know a lot about chemistry and the chemistry and science of baking. So I thought I could teach you some of that. You see, the more you know about something you're doing, the better you're going to do it. So let's get started. Okay, here I have 4 different things. I have a bagel, which is bread. I've got a cookie, a cracker, and a cupcake. Now, they're all made with basically the same things. Flour, some liquid, what's called a leavening agent. Leavening means to rise up. But they're all different. This bread isn't tender. It's kind of rubbery. The cookie is flat, the cracker's flat, and it's not tender, and the cupcake is tender and crumbly. Now, how does it happen that these, all made with basically the same thing, are so different? Well, it's all in the ingredients. So we're going to take the ingredients one by one and talk about them and see what we can learn. Let's get started by making some cupcakes.
Here's the recipe. Are you ready? Yes. Mix together 1 quart of milk and 1 pound of flour. Then to these ingredients, add 2 fresh...
No, not like that. Let's do it the right way. Okay, that was fun. So now let's look at these cupcakes and see what we got, see what we can learn. All right, let's cut one of these in half, see what it looks like. Now there you can see the inside of the cupcake. Here's a better picture. Okay, here's the inside of the cupcake. You see all the holes? There's some big holes, and there's many, many, many very small holes that you can't hardly see. So the first question is, what makes these holes? The second question is, what happened to the batter? It's completely transformed into something else. So let's figure this out. Now what causes those bubbles is called leavening, or a leavening agent. Now there's two kinds of leavening generally used in cupcakes and cookies and shortbreads like that. The first one's very simple. Do you remember when we were mixing the eggs and I said to mix them till they're really foamy? We were adding air to the eggs, and that carries over when the cupcakes are baked. It's a small addition of air, but it's effective. The second kind is called sodium bicarbonate. You know it as baking soda. Now, baking soda is a base. You've probably heard of acids and bases. An acid is like vinegar or lemon juice. Bases are like ammonia. Bases are in washing detergents. When an acid and base come together, they react with each other. And they usually give off some kind of gas or other liquid. In the case of baking soda, when it reacts with an acid, it releases CO2, carbon dioxide gas. And that's what makes the bubbles in the cupcakes. Now watch. I'm going to take a glass of warm water and I'm going to put baking soda in it. You see, nothing happens. But now I'm going to add vinegar. You see all the bubbles? That's what makes cupcake rise. Now, if you remember, when we made the cupcakes, we used baking powder. Now, baking powder is a little different. It's the same material, it's sodium bicarbonate, but it's got acid already in it. In fact, it's got two kinds of acids. One of them works in just a warm, wet environment, and the other works better in the heat of the oven. Now watch when I put baking powder in a glass of warm water. You see the bubbles? It's not as dramatic as when I added vinegar to the baking soda, but since there's two kinds of acid, it works very well. Now when you're making especially cupcakes and you mix up the batter, you don't want to leave the batter sitting around. You want to get it in the oven as fast as you can. The reason is that it starts to react immediately, as you saw. And the longer it sits around, that gas is going to escape because it's just sitting in liquid. Okay, now let's talk about what turned our liquid batter into this solid cupcake. And that brings us to the flour. There are many kinds of flour. There's wheat flour, rye flour, corn flour, rice flour, buckwheat flour, coconut flour, almond flour, and even banana flour. But you will be using wheat flour, and more specifically, white wheat flour. So where does wheat come from? Now this is going to get a bit complicated, but hang in there with me and you will understand it. This is wheat. It is a grass that produces seeds like this. And here is the inside of the seed. You can see there are three main parts: the bran, the germ, and the endosperm. To understand what these parts do, it might be helpful to compare the wheat seed to a chicken egg because the functions of the parts are similar. An egg has a shell to protect the inside of the egg. The bran of the seed is like the shell and it protects the inside of the seed. The germ of the seed is like the yolk of the egg because that is where the new plant or the new chicken comes from. The endosperm is like the white of the egg. They are both food for the new plant or chicken. Now you have probably heard of whole wheat flour. With whole wheat flour, the entire seed is ground up into flour. But with white flour, the shell and the germ are removed, and only the endosperm is ground up. The endosperm has two main parts, starch and gluten. It is the gluten that we are concerned with here. Gluten is a protein. There are proteins in many of the foods you eat, like eggs and meat. When proteins are heated or otherwise affected in some way, they go through a process called denaturation. Denaturation simply means changing from a natural state. The same thing happens when you cook an egg or a piece of meat. The nature of the protein is changed. In science, we sometimes have to use our imagination to visualize how things work that we can't see easily. In order to visualize how this happens, I'm using spaghetti strands to represent the way gluten exists naturally in wheat. They are separate coiled strands. When they are heated in a moist environment, the strands uncoil, and this allows them to mix and tangle with each other. Once they are baked in the oven and the leavening has done its job, it solidifies into a stable structure like this. That's how the liquid batter changes into a solid cake. Another thing you need to understand about gluten in flour. Different flours have different amounts of gluten. The more gluten in a flour, the stronger or tougher the resulting product will be. So if you want to make a bagel, you want a flour with a lot of gluten. If you want to make a cupcake, you want much less gluten. Does that make sense? Here are the different kinds of flour that are common in baking along with their gluten protein content. Bread flour is about 14%. All-purpose flour is about 11%, and cake flour is only 8%. If you are making bread, you would use bread flour because it has more gluten in it. For tender cupcakes, it makes sense to use cake flour because it has a lot less gluten. If you have ever seen bread being made, you see they push, pull, and stretch the dough. This is called developing the gluten. Just like how the heat denatures the gluten, kneading the dough stretches and uncoils the gluten. That is why when we were making the cupcakes, I said not to overmix the batter because you don't want to develop the gluten too much in a cupcake to keep it tender. So we're almost done, but I need to talk about the other ingredients that we haven't talked about yet. So what does the egg do? The egg adds another level of structure to the mixture. You know how the egg proteins go through the same denaturization as the gluten, and so changes from a jelly to a more substantial state. The butter adds its nice butter flavor, but it also causes the gluten to be even more flexible and tender. The milk adds some needed moisture and is richer than just adding water. The vanilla, of course, is just a flavor. There are many flavorings you might add find in recipes from lemon to chocolate and many others. As you can see, there's a lot of chemistry in baking. So that's about it. I hope you enjoyed this video and learned something. I really enjoyed doing it. So make a video for me of you making your cupcakes. I'd love to see that. See you later.